Mr. Brian Seipp. So Mr. Brian was at the Nottingham Super Major, excuse me. Let me close some of these tabs because I'm pretty heavy on these tabs over here, boys. So yeah. Sorry, I've had so many. Okay. So Brian was actually ended up getting fifth at the major. He didn't make it to the final bracket. He was at the top, so barely cut short, dude. I feel you on that. Sorry to see that, but super major, fantastic, huge event. 300 plus. I think it was like 388 players. So even getting fourth is an amazing achievement. And sometimes you just a couple of points missed here and there from cards, dude. So anybody that's like, oh man, he did a great job. He did a great job, and he always does. Brian, we've seen him before, Art of War stuff. So check out the Art of War if he shows up on there and starts doing any interviews or anything. I'm sure he'll have some cool stuff to say. If not, Brian, hit me up. So let's take a look at his tactical brigade. So we have a Big Mek in mega armor with the mech captain. I absolutely love that. That's my favorite way to run the flash kits with this enhancement as a 10-man unit. The 4-up invul and regenning units is amazing, and it's a great way to get the game kickstarted. Then he has 3 Big Meks with shock attack guns, with one with the gob boomer, and then 3 war bosses. He has 3 units of Breaker Boyz. They're all kitted out with hammers and then the tank hammer. 1 burner boy, the 10-man unit of flash kits with the 5-man unit of flash kits, 1 Gretchen, 2 storm boy units, and then 3 Trukks. Boom. So it's funny because I did a video with last week on orc list to kind of look out for that are going to come out, and I think I wrote a very similar version of this list, or I found a very similar version of this list on there, as this is what a lot of people are expecting to see. So some people might see this and immediately get a little upset. Oh, you're spamming the same unit, blah blah blah, get us nerfed, and I get it. I'm not saying blah 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 as in you have nothing to not we say isn't worth being heard. I'm saying we've heard it before because this is kind of how competitive 40k can turn out sometimes. But I will say that we should all be encouraged that you can do great and still win without doing this. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing this because each meta calls for different tools and tech pieces based off the terrain you're going to be on, what you're expecting to see. And that's something we've shown throughout the whole stream today is that with all these different attachments and lists, is that people a lot of the time were just teching into what's in their meta and applying that. And Brian going into a super major means that he had to be even more diverse, which is where a lot of the time these redundant builds come from, is that you're gonna have to fight a lot of these different armies that all are kind of vulnerable to this to a certain extent, but you need to bring the tool over and over again so you can keep using it and have more assured outcomes in those cases, especially if you're playing like 8-round events and stuff, and they're just looking for straight damage. Not sure if the Breaker Boy things will hold though, right? And I'm just saying that right now, even with Brian doing so freaking good, I think the majority of the general community will still find great success with just 1 Breaker Boy unit. So I don't think Brian is promoting any of you guys go out and get there. I think our get just understood that goes great into custodians, does great into elite space marines, does great into demons, does great into armor heavy lists. So Brian did great by going undefeated. Shout out to our sponsors, the Baron of Dice, as they helped us do our Waaaghtaktiks dice. So shout them out. Check them out in description, 5% off in the discount because nobody likes taxes. And shout out to Baron of Dice. They allow us to do our paint competition. So thank you very much to them. So let's take a look at his path to victory by the great Brian Seipp. So game 1, we have Aldari Craft World, which is one of those armies which you're like, not sure if that damage tree would be great, right? And that's why I wanted to look at it. So we have our Artark Wayleaper, excuse my English, followed by an Avatar of Kane, Death Jester, a Farseer, Fugan, the Visark, and then Hyavrin. So what is this? This is what's it called? Yanari. He is Yanari. Avatar, right, is like the best target for everybody on this list wants to get a chunk out of Avatar in this version of the arc. We have triple fire prism, which these guys are sick because if one can see you, they can all kind of focus through him and channel through him and see you, which is really potent if you have like that 10-man unit of flash kits and you're like, oh no, everything can just target me down in my 4-up invuln and completely punish me. Mind you, it's a huge point investment to focus down just some flash kits. Then we have Rangers, a unit of 5 Scorpions, 2 5-man units of Swooping Hawks, and then a Harley Quinn trope, a big, what is that, 10-man, 20-man unit? That's right, man. I didn't even know they had those. That's pretty sick. So unique Eldar list. Not gonna pretend I know exactly how that works. I just know, like I've said before, orc trucks followed by flash gets shooting, and a lot of the time this is how you end up using the flash gets shooting, which is why I point out that fire prism thing. Is you take the truck, you get quite aggressive with the flash gate unit, you drop it into somewhere near the middle of the battlefield, so you can overlook multiple objectives, and then as soon as the Eldar player wants to move a unit around, just let them know. As soon as you move that guy into this path, I'm overwatching you. And that just messes up all of his movement phase, and you start picking up multiple Eldar units the longer that unit's alive. So you'll get out, shoot one, but then the next time you're like, anytime you move the stage and shoot anything, I'll overwatch you. And that just messes up their game plan a lot of the time. Not to mention, if they close the distance, they're going to get beat up by all those Breaker Boys and Tankbusters. So Brian just bullied them, 100, almost 100 point, 99 point game right there. Then we'll move on to his second game. We have the Chaos Demons, and again, we see something like the Bellacore, but this is the index detachment. So you're going to see Waaaghtaktiks, the Changeling, the Great Unclean One with the Endless Gift for the 4-up Feel No Pain, 2 units of Nurglings, Plague Bears, 2 units of Blood Crushers, and then 2 Flesh Hound units. This is one of those lists where you're happy you have so much that I utterly destroy demons and greater demon type of unit. Just if you cripple Waaaghtaktiks on this list, this is one of those big things because he's casting shadows. He's giving feel no pains to other units that are around him that he's trying to be around. He's cutting OC, stuff like that. You end up killing Waaaghtaktiks. You end up killing a Bloodthirster, and you deal with these blood crushers, and then the rest of the army just kind of slowly falls apart. The Great Unclean One usually just be left alone and kill everything, unless you have very specific tools, like a big 20-man unit of Beak Snaggle Boys and Gaz and a War Horde. I don't advise even going for this guy, so you learn to play around and kill everything else, which is why we said Brian teched into this, because he understood I'm gonna have to kill a lot of people that are bringing hard skews because they're going to such a big event. They don't want to have a bad performance. These big events, you're going to see a lot of skews because a skew ensures that you're more likely to win more games than you lose. Therefore, people have to have tools to utterly demolish a skew, score big on them, that way they can perform well. So that's why Brian ends up going into these tools. Really great by him, having these guys away when they try to come out and rush and nesting doll you, because they'll come down, try to get 6-inch, try to get off on you, and you can't really let that happen as an orc player on such fragile units that you have between Tankbusters and Breakers. So you take advantage of your trucks, take advantage of your Storm Boys running out, and then you take advantage of your Overwatch, and you just, hey, Blood Crushers, popping lethal sustain and utterly destroying you guys. Hey, and that feels good. So great job, Mr. Brian. Recall by there, 99-point win there. I think if you're going to an event, get familiar with demons, because they can either break you and end up beating you on accident, and you're like, no, I should have beat you, or you crush them and you get huge scores. A lot of the time, been never. And so with game 3, we go into Space Marine Blood Angels Liberator Assault Group. So a lot of the time in this detachment, when you're playing something like Warhorde, you're like, I got more stuff than you. I'll fight on death and run into you. In this case, it's elite on elite, boys. So we have an ancient and Terminator armor and a captain. Light on characters, respectable, because usually these guys just run out of unit. So he has assault intercessors followed by a basic intercessor for sticky objective. Then we have 3 5-man units of intercessor squads, because these guys can actually get stuck in and fight quite effectively in this detachment. 2 ballistas dreadnoughts, so effective for their points and shooting. A little bit of anti-tank. They act as bait for other enemy shooting armies as well. They can go out, get stuff kickstarted, and pull up some charges, like get some bait going for you, or they just hold your backline and screen for you. Then a Brutalis dreadnought, followed by 2 scout squads, that big Terminator brick, and then 2 Vindicators. So this is the actual more reliable shooting, and it kind of overlaps with those cheap dreadnoughts. So that all of your guns are 2-up armor saves and D6 damage. So if it goes off hard. And I like to see that. And then of course Vindicators shoot in combat, so they can kind of follow up your gun line, considering that they don't have great range. Follow up your melee potential, because they don't have great range. And then a Cladius Assassin. So many Cladius Assassins still making their way onto this. Keep in mind, this is that UKTC terrain, which means they have like big, no offense, right? They have kind of a big open firing lane sometimes on one side of the table. And then the other side of the table, they have good staging points where you can move up, set up like trucks or battle wagons, it is, and then get out and charge. But then the enemy unit will line that opposing building. So you do have to be somewhat fast and KG, and understand that one side of the board is going to be kind of open no man's land, the other side is going to be where all the combat's going on. So I can see why he brought like Vindicators and those guys to kind of hold that side while the jetpacks runs from terrain to terrain. Brutalis maybe gets some good charges in. I think it's pretty cool. Pretty cool version of Blood Angels. And this was actually Brian's lowest scoring game. So the fact that someone had so much actually elite like killy versions of Blood Angels and then had the ability to close the distance on you and actually kill them could be quite frightening. And he's not so loaded on characters, which means you just have even more units of all these dumb Blood Angel, cheapness that can fight you so good and shoot you just good enough. I mean, you don't even want an assault intercessor, a unit running into your breaker boys after a truck gets popped, because between impact charges and their buffs, they can actually beat the crap out of you. And then this Terminator squad with a storm shield means that you're losing like half as many Terminators to those tank busters when they get shot, when they shoot at them, if they shoot at them. Not to mention Vindicators actually have the ability to possibly tank the tank buster shooting, or in my experience, even tank the breaker boys melee after they've already been damaged from other stuff like grenades and bomb squigs, because they pop armor of contempt and the chance they just roll the saves and they're all right and you don't roll hot enough. Not always, but I'm saying that could contribute to this becoming a harder game, which is what we see based off the score. So not sure exactly what it is. We're just covering the potentials of how it became possibly happened. But Brian pulled it out still. Good job there. Then he goes on to his game 4. And in this game, he gets a 100 against the Thousand Suns. Thousand Suns have typically hated Orcs pressure in Orcs because they're like, I shoot you and then oops, I'm now have nothing to follow you up and kill you with. So in this case, we have Tank Busters now. So we have we have Armon on Disc of Siege, followed by an Exalted Sorcerer on Disc of Siege, 2 Infernal Masters, 3 Infernal Masters, and then Magnus the Red. We have 3 units of 5 Rubric Marines, followed by a Zangor Enlighten, 2 Mutilated Vortex Beasts, 2 Cultist units, and then a Zangor Enlighten 5-man unit. Or is it a 5-man unit? So he scored 100 points on this. A lot of the time they try to use Magnus and maybe tank some damage and stuff. Magnus isn't really appreciating that. Even if you ignore Magnus, Mutilated Vortex Beasts are perfect profiles into tank busters. They're like, oh, you're T10 and like 12 wounds? Cool, bro, you're dead. And then, like I said, Rubric Marines would hate Orcs already as it is. So I just don't think with the point cost of T Suns, and then you're playing into Brian, I'm sure it got overwhelming quite quickly, especially if Brian went first. So 100 points there by Mr. Brian. Great job. And I like that. After you get to 77, got to pull out 100. But that 77, I bet you got Brian a little angry boy, because that's probably what stopped him from getting that last bracket. Harsh. Then he goes to his 5th game, where he goes into the Custodians. So he finally seen the Custodians, and this is something that's kind of like gatekeeperish in my opinion, where you're going to see it all over the mid tables, or even in this case, make it to some of the later tables, because it's that good, especially if it has a good pilot or boys hot rolling 4-ups that day. So we have a Blade Champion, followed by a Telemon, who's a character. That's pretty cool. 2 Caladius Grav Tanks, because they're super effective anti-tank vehicles. Only 1 unit of Wardens, 2 units of Prosecutors, 2 Telemon Heavy Dreadnoughts, followed by 3 Contemptor Dreadnought. So you bring the Contemptors because they actually have some shooting involved in them, instead of just bringing like the fancy ones, and they're a good point cost. And then the Telemons, again, they're kind of like a Redemptor Dreadnought in a lot of cases, but just bigger and a little bit tougher with invulns. But like I said, this kind of list is exactly why Brian brought this kind of orc list. You have to be able to break this many Telemons, this many Dreadnoughts, this many 3-wound units. You have to have strong shooting, and not just in one phase with actual AP, so you can kill the Wardens, because they'll just pop the 4 up, feel no pain, and then you can't do anything to them. You need to threaten at least Grav Tanks, so they can't just disrespectfully shoot all of your trucks at will. So nonetheless, this exact list is why Brian would bring this kind of list he brought, and the score showed it because he got a 96-point win, right? So the Breaker Boys in this case would get up to strength 7, which would help them even if they went into infantry, but in this case, they don't have to go into any infantry for custodes. They just, everything here is subject to any one of Brian's units. And then the flash kits are left over to chew up prosecutors or assist in jumping in these units. In a lot of the games, you might even use the flash kits, like I said, in a Grey Knight matchup where they don't have a lot of great targets. You're going to let them come out, act as kind of like the quick starter for the enemy to activate and come into you, and then you call the wall, get good efficiency out of your breaker boys and your tank busters, because they actually have to get kind of close to you. And the flash kits are valuable enough that the enemy will go for it, and they have durable enough at range that the enemy will have layers to whatever they attack it with, which means you have now successfully baited them and can get good value on your very efficient elite Brian Seipp Orc Tactical Brigade list. So whoa for Mr. Brian Seipp for getting 5-0 and just barely falling outside of that top bracket. Unfortunate Blood Angel, bad Blood Angel guy. no goodbye, you get crumped easier. So let's go over the list one more time. We have Big Mech and Mega Armor with Mech Captain, my favorite way to run that brick. 3 shock attack guns, 1 with God Boomer, 3 War Bosses, 3 Breaker Boy units, followed by 3 Tankbuster units, 1 Burner Boy unit, a 10-man unit of Flash Kits with a 5-man unit of Flash Kits, 2 5-man units of Storm Boys, and simply 3 Trukks. Boom, should be surprised. This list is something similar to this list. It's going to be popular. It's going to be everywhere sometimes, especially after this weekend. So yeah, check it out. We talked about it last weekend. So great job by Mr. Brian. I think when you're going to something like a super major, there is absolutely nothing wrong with running this kind of list because you need it for the kind of hard skews and big point scoring differentials you need to gain at this kind of events. So great job by Brian, and hope to see you doing more greatness with the Great WAAAGH. If you enjoyed the clip, check out the full video here. If you'd like to see more tactics, click here.
Let's get stuck in, lads!